Everyone who joins us, hey, it's working now.
Thank you so much again. Yeah, no, okay, so what happened literally is the second the screen turned on before, it just froze immediately on a terrifying screen grab of me smiling like a psychopath. And you're just like, and I'm like, oh no, and I tried to just close the screen, but nothing was working. So I'm like, okay, cool. Of course this is happening now.
Yeah, it's cool to talk to you in person. We've chatted a little online.
Yeah, I think the only time we've met in person, like, was at the panel for Lightbox. And then
yeah.
I think I met you like 1,000 years ago at TTN, but there's no world in which you remember that interaction.
you know, sometimes I'll meet people and I'll be like, I met you in 2004 and it was Tuesday. Like sometimes it's like that, and then sometimes it's like I met you yesterday and I have no recollection.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I feel like being in the same space for like days unending have really compounded I just have a horrible memory. And like there are moments where I'm like, why did I bring this object into this room? And I'm like, just aged 1,000 years.
I'll walk upstairs like to get a sweatshirt or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then walk downstairs and go, why did I go up there? I'm cold. I need my sweatshirt. Oh, wait, that's why I went up there. And I'll do that like 6 times before I finally get the object that's going again.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad to know I'm not alone in my like, wow, I'm just slowly losing my mind in here. Oh, man. But yeah, how are you doing? It is really cool because I feel like we've only ever chatted in context of like, oh, storyboarding and storyboarding.
Yeah. You're a fellow skater, I see.
I am. I was really close. If I didn't have I have an edit session today, so I'm just like throwing files at the editor. But Ethan, I told Ethan I was going because I saw you were talking to him, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm talking to Rad tomorrow. He's like, you should go skate. And I'm like, should I go skate?
Yeah,
so if it was any other day.
We should do an IG live skate session.
Yeah.
Next time. Do you ever go to skate parks, or do you usually just do street?
Usually I do bike path. Like I'll go to the Santa Monica bike path, and I'll go like up to Will Rogers and down to Venice. I stop by the skate park, but I'm like way too intimidated by the skaters.
Yeah. Like
the skateboard skaters in the skate park. I'm like, oh, this is very much your domain. So I just sort of sit there watching them.
you gotta find a park that's like an emptier, larger park. That park's very small, confined, and packed, so a lot of people running into each other.
Yeah, it's a lot of just weird near misses, and I'm like, this is just terrible. Like, because there'll be like little kids and then like tall grown people all kind of vying for the same just railing or something, and I'm just like, I'm gonna watch some child die today. Like, it's just very scary.
You'd be surprised how resilient kids are. I see people just fly at them like 100 miles an hour, just knock them down the floor. Kid just gets back up and goes. Like, no.
I will admit, the one time I like actually like crashed into a child, like I was like bruised to hell and back, and the kid was like, "Whoop," just walked away. And like I tried so hard to avoid them that I don't even think any part of me made contact with them. I just like careened over the child, and they're like, "Oh no!" And I'm like, "It's fine, everything's fine."
I've been lucky. I've never ran into a child skateboarding.
It's not a great. I don't recommend. I feel like it's because like on the bike path in Santa Monica, it's like a mixture of cyclists and people who are like bike path people, and then tourists. So it's not everyone is going along the like direction they're supposed to be going, or someone will like. I think what happened, it was like a kid was coming, and now I'm like paranoid about this because he was going in front of me, and like we were going the same way, and then he turned, and I wasn't expecting him to suddenly be going the opposite way.
Yeah, watch out for those kids, man. They're just like, you never know where they're going. Did you grow up out on the west side?
Oh no, I'm from Brooklyn originally, so I'm used to parks, like different parks than out here. But yeah, I only came out here 2009 for school. Oh God, that's like a while ago now, dude.
Do you know the Brooklyn Banks is like a famous skate spot?
Yeah, yeah. I never went. It's funny because I feel like I got more into skating when I was out here. Because when I was in New York, I did ballet for a really long time, and so like dance was kind of my life, and skating was more a hobby. And I came out here, and I was like, well, dance is gone, so I guess skating is life now.
So did you think you were gonna be a ballet dancer?
Oh no, like that. I think that was the one thing where, because there were girls in like my studio who they were like, going down that fame LaGuardia, like this is, and I'm like, I just don't think this is for me.
Yeah.
but, but dance is intense, man. Like they go really hard. But I miss it. It was fun.
That's cool. I remember I had a buddy that took dance classes when we were kids, and as a kid, I was like, man, what a dork. What's he doing? And then
You are such a supportive friend.
We got a little older where we were like high school age, and we were at a party, and he was like just straight up breakdancing.
Just
like,
destroying
crazy,
you.
Destroying it. And everyone was in love with it. I was like, I should have taken that class with him.
I feel like that's like every hobby growing up, like all those things that you're like, that's kind of, and then you get older and you're like, God, I wish I learned how to play like the trombone or something, like, like all those things that your friends did that you were skeptical about.
I went and bought a piano when I was like 25.
Nice.
And I put it in my house, and I did not touch it for like 4 years.
So it's a decorative piano.
It was just there. I was like, I'm going to learn to play the piano.
Yeah, so I maybe did that not recently, but like last year. I own a violin now for that same reason.
Okay.
Because last year I had like a fever dream where I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna learn to play violin. And so for like a week, I did that, and then I was like, when like a weekend. Yeah, I got a solid week of, it's hard. It's very hard. The violin is not an instrument you just jump right into, by the way.
No, you got to know how to like rosin the bow.
Yeah, I was like, this is like a whole... So we'll get to that, but I feel you on the like, sometimes the spirit just moves you, and you're like, I'm going to do this thing I've never done before.
I'm very much if I have a thought in my head, I just do it without any thought. Like,
so we're the same. My sister is always making fun of me because she's like, we watch Hamilton, and she's like, you're just such a Hamilton type of person, and she's such a Burr type of person where she like thinks things through, whereas I like do them and then reflect on whether that was a good idea after they're already done.
Just take the lessons for the next time, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, and now we know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What are you working on right now?
Oh yeah, right now I'm over at Disney. I'm directing on the new Proud Family. Cool. And I went to my first record. I can't say anything about it besides it's gonna be lit. Oh my God, the voices they're getting for this one it's insane.
That's incredible.
but yeah, it's really cool. It's kind of surreal because like Bruce Smith is one of the artists that like really informed everything I do, and so like working with him directly is it's like a bizarre feeling. And on one hand, I'm like, okay, just like don't turn on that part of your brain. I'm sure you felt this, where you're like, you're working
part,
yeah, exactly. Like, just keep that part nice and repressed, so you don't suddenly be like, oh my God, you did what? Like, just let that sit quietly.
It's always a trip when you start working with someone you were a fan of, sometimes since you were a child, in many cases. And then you're like, oh, this is just a silly human. Or depending
it's just,
on the person.
Just a normal person who really likes animation, just like you.
When I say silly, I'm specifically thinking like I worked with Chris Sanders.
What?
And he was just such a goofball. Like, he'd like run out of the middle of the meeting and come back with a bag of candy. Like, anybody want some candy?
This is great, just information to know. I've never personally met, I mean, obviously know of Chris Sanders, but I'm just like, oh, good to know.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is like, you grew up idolizing people.
Yeah, and it's like, it's a really weird switch to make when you're like, oh yeah, this person who's like, super talented, but also like will just randomly put on voices or something, or has like all these little like quirks to them. You're like, wow, you're kind of a dork too. It's like, yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the cool things. I was just talking to another friend about this, where it's like I feel like animation attracts the weirdest people, like, to itself.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's like a little bit like kind of
Yeah.
Asperger's, because like
just a little bit crazy in some way. Anxiety is just like a baseline. We assume everybody's got like a little.
Yeah.
So.
You could definitely get by your whole career without ever making eye contact with anyone.
I feel like I know people who are doing this. Like, I'm watching in real time. I'm like, you've been working for like 10 years. I've never like locked eyes with you.
It's a special kind of person that you're able to sit at a desk for 10 hours and not notice that you've just been drawing and zone everything out. Like, I always felt like it's not even that so much natural talent or skill or ability, it's what kind of human being could sit there and put
it's
something
like a
around.
unique type of masochism. Because it's funny because like I'm extroverted. The Myers-Briggs will not allow me to not be extroverted. But I'm like, but I spend hours of the day sitting alone, just drawing quietly by myself, sometimes talking out loud. But I'm like, what kind of a person does this? Like, elects to do this?
Someone just asked, how did you guys get into animation? What's your story? Were you drawing in high school?
I was definitely the always drawing kid, but I liked writing as well. So I was constantly like drawing and writing, and for the longest time I didn't know I'd go into animation. I kind of, because like my parents are from the West Indies, and like it's just not a job that you're like told of as a child. But I refused to not be doing it. And then I like, even though I didn't know animation was a job, I think at some point I was like, but I like drawing and I like telling stories. Maybe I'll like be a novelist. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. So I applied for a creative writing program, and I ended up moving out here to go write. So I went to UCLA as a writer, but I was double majoring in fine arts, which in retrospect was just like, I love fine arts programs, but it kind of, like when I try to remember what I was doing in the fine arts program, I was just like, remember that time we were like sitting outside UCLA just pouring photochemicals on paper for reasons? Like, just a lot of really weird things were happening. But like the writing program was the more grounded one at the time. But
I visited the art program because when I went to UC Santa Barbara, I thought about maybe double majoring in art and engineering. And I visited some of the art teachers, and they started telling me about like creating spaces where hay was hanging from the ceiling.
It's a trip, man.
That's what we'd be doing. And I'm like, no, I want to draw cartoons. They're like,
I
feel like do art.
I persistently sort of drew cartoons in the midst of things where they're like, but could you just like do art? And I was like, yeah, we're doing that. But like, what if I made like a moving, like an animated print, like an intaglio, like an etching, but it's going to be like several etchings that then move, and they're like, why are you? No, but like in retrospect, I feel like I was trying to do animation in like all the least intuitive ways. But all this to say, I eventually did find a class called Writing for Animation. It was a storyboarding class, and that was kind of my first like not professional, but like major, like, oh, I could just do this instead.
You write a lot. Have you also written on animated shows?
Yeah, I think professionally, somehow all my credits are from preschool, even though like none of my like writing samples are preschool. Like I have one that's just like demons in New York, and somehow people read this, they're like, coming right on our preschool show. Nice. But yeah, I wrote for this Netflix series called Super Monsters, and right now I'm writing on this Disney Junior thing as well that I can't say anything about because the drones they will shoot me from the sky.
I wrote a lot of scenes in feature, but we never got any kind of credit for writing.
Oh, yeah, it's really tricky. I've never actually worked on a board-driven show or like in feature, but the more I learn about like those spaces where artists have a lot of sway, like on story, it's just very bizarre to hear of the like the board artists are basically writing a lot, but they still don't have like any writing credits. So, like,
yeah, I've been trying to make that shift. So I don't know if you saw the interview I did or the talk I did with my buddy Andre. We actually got our first paid pilot writing gig,
Nice.
which was dope. So we got to write a pilot, and I'm definitely trying to like straddle both those worlds as well. So it's cool to meet other people who are also doing that.
Yes, come be a switch. We are so rare. It's like I don't know why it like shocks people all the time where they're like, "You're right, and you're just," I'm like, yes, they're all storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I understand. Like obviously, it's like it's a different medium, and like words require a different. It's like the difference between like working in clay versus like oil painting or sculpting even, where it's like the ideas are the same, but you need to like master whatever the tool set is.
You know what took me the biggest or was the hardest transition was when I'm writing a scene that I'm also storyboarding, I can tell when it's going on too long. So it's very easy to click through and watch it and go, you got to wrap it up now. Got to end here. If you keep going, people are going to lose interest. Like it's very, like you're just seeing the movie.
Yeah.
And the first thing I noticed when I started writing is I almost wrote double. And so I would write something and then I would go to board it and I would go, oh, this is where it should have ended. And I had to kind of get used to when I'm writing, like forcing myself to picture what the storyboard version is.
Yeah.
To like understand where the timing's going to go too long.
Yeah, it's really interesting, but I swear, like once you have that down, like you become like the writer dream of, because your scripts, because you know what the challenges are for a board artist or for a director. When they get scripts that are that visual, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not confused. Yeah. There's nothing here that like only works on the page. And yeah, like there were definitely instances on like Super Monsters, for example, and I think this is aired so I can talk about it. But like they had this one instance where like I wanted to do like this plant roller coaster thing, but I was like, okay, this could be a nightmare for boards if we do this wrong. So I was like, okay, like without telling the camera where to go, kind of playing it out where it's like, oh, the character's standing on the ground. Suddenly he's jettisoned into the air. And like the second you use language kind of like that, you're like, oh, the board artist will see kind of how you would stage it, where it's like, oh, the person's standing there. And then we just see, and he's gone. And so you're not having to see like this crazy macro shot of a roller coaster. And like, yeah, I feel like once you figure out how to like translate your storyboard brain into the page, it becomes like, oh, I see it. I see the matrix.
The other thing I noticed, and it's funny because I was talking to Peter Ramsey was talking about this too, was you think, like, for instance, if you're show running or directing, you think you tell somebody something that's so clear in your mind. You're like, oh, just do this, this, and this. It'll be so great. Go do that. And then they come back a week later and it's not at all what you thought you said. And then you realize, I don't know if you've run into this, but then you realize, oh, I have to over-explain.
Oh, I've definitely. Yeah, as I'm sure you've already realized, I talk very quickly and I interrupt my own thoughts. And so when I became a director, I was like, you need to slow it down like 5,000% because your brain is just stopping thoughts midway. Be like, oh, you get it, you know. And the board artists are like, what do you want from me? But yeah, it's really. But then there's the opposite too, where it's like you explain something, you're like, I don't even know if that made any sense, and then they're like, this bam, and I'm like, thank you.
It's also when you go to record someone who's like an actor, it's similar, or certain board artists, like sometimes you have it in your head a certain way, it just like comes out exactly that way. You're like, wow, did you read my mind?
Yeah.
Or sometimes you go to record an actor and it's as if like the exact way you read it in your head is like how they read it. You're like,
yeah,
oh,
it's so. I have so much like awe and respect for voice actors because I'm just like, how did you know like exactly how I heard it in my brain? Because it's not like you're telling them like say it like this. You're just like, your words, I hope for the best.
And then sometimes like I worked with this board artist, Joanne Matt, and I would have it in my head one way. She would just rewrite it, do it totally different than I'd ever thought, and we'd go to a screening, and that would be like everyone's favorite part. You know? Like, and no, I liked it too. Not that I didn't like it, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
no,
saying,
I love that moment where you're like, oh, okay, yes, this is you're right. That is funnier.
yeah, or just like, whoa, this wasn't even anywhere in my mind. Like, this is so cool. This is like a totally different thing, but it's great.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah,
I
no,
love either one of those. Either it's exactly what I thought, or it's totally different, but it's great.
yeah, you know, it's those are the like perfect scenarios. I love also working with artists that are like they can draw a type of drawing that is just not even the way my brain works. Like right now on Proud, I have like I love my board guys. They're awesome. But one of my board guys is like a comedy, like strong comedy board artist, and I'm like, my brain literally can't think of these. Like my brain doesn't draw this way. Like when I think of images, this is not where my mind goes. And so I'm just like, just go, just go as far as you can. We'll rein you in if you go too far.
I remember I was working with this board artist, Derek Dryman, who had worked on SpongeBob, and he looked at my boards. He's like, "Dude, you don't draw funny. Like, you need to," and he just drew over my drawing. He's like, "Why aren't you just make it stupid? Like, you're trying to draw it too good. Like,
Yeah.
like if you draw it a little stupider, it'll actually be better." And that was like the best advice I ever got.
Yeah, it's like very counterintuitive, but it's like, oh, I was trying to like draw them accurately, and therefore it was just not as interesting.
Like, yeah, now I've gotten to the point where sometimes like I'm more focused on, will it read funny, will it read interesting, and sometimes that means actually drawing it kind of bad, like,
yeah,
or not correct.
Yeah, because I love those moments where, and it sometimes they're like single drawings in the border. I'm like, I know we'll never be able to like really preserve the energy of this drawing because it's just a different style mode from the show. But I'll like take a screen grab and be like, this is a perfect drawing, and it's just like this weird, like half version of the character, and I'm like, but it's perfect. It is a perfect drawing.
It was kind of dope on Kipo because everything is drawn by hand on paper.
Oh, what?
One of our board artists and directors, Bridget, she would do these expressions that were like way off model, and they would actually find a way to just kind of mimic the way she drew it, even though it didn't look like exactly like the design sheets.
That's so cool. Also, is this Bridget? God, I forget her last name. She's on she's over here now. Yes.
Yeah,
she's at Disney. I met her recently. She's so cool.
Maybe Owl House?
Yeah, I think on Owl House. Yeah.
That's a dope show too.
Yeah, when I first saw like the pilot for that show, and I think they have an in-house animator, because there's some sorcery going on in the animation of that show. It was like, what is happening here?
Like that shot in the opening where she's flying towards camera,
yeah.
I think was animated by someone at the studio.
Yeah, I'm blanking. There's Stephen something. There's this one animator that I think is the animator, but I'm blanking on the name because I'm the worst with names. But yeah, I love though that like Kipo or Owl House, like they're and like Proud as well. Like I feel like we're starting to get to a point again where like animation is really pushing like past its own limitations, and I'm like there are these really cool sequences or just like interesting types of shots that I haven't seen in animation for a while, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so excited for what's happening right now.
Yeah, like
Spencer, yes. Oh my god, thank you, person on the thing. I was like, Spencer Juan, is that Juan? Yes. Thank you, people on the chat. Thank you, Kofi, for knowing the name Spencer Juan. I'm 90% sure he's the one who did that.
Nice.
Like,
yeah, I feel like a lot of us grew up as animation and anime fans, and so the fact that now we're directing and show running, like you're bringing that kind of like fanboy mentality to pushing things, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like between like the Copelands and you. So like half of the people now are just like, yes, the anime fan time has come.
Yeah.
Oh man, do you still design skateboards? I feel like that was when I met you in TTN. It was when you had like your skateboard line, had just kind of been a thing that you were doing. So whatever that was, however many years ago that was, like 5-6 years ago.
One of those things. That's one of those things we were talking about where I had a thought in my mind, I'm going to start a skateboard company, and I just did it without any thought. Yeah,
That's
I made
awesome.
hats and decks and shirts and stuff for a while.
Yeah.
It was cool. I made a lot of cool friends. Ultimately, it's not a very profitable business.
I can see that. Yeah, it definitely feels like one of those realms where it's like the hustle is extreme to get to a point where you're actually making like real like profits.
It's it's definitely like a fully dedicated for 10 years before you might start seeing some profits. So I was like, and that was right when Kipo got greenlit, so I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna go all in on Kipo.
Yeah.
So I kind of shut that down and went in.
That's fair. I mean, between you're like, that show that I could, my show or fledgling skateboard company, I feel like the skateboard company will be there. You can do that later.
Yeah. Do I want to keep losing money on the skateboard company, or do I want to go make a show?
It's a hard one. But I hope you do a show about skater stuff someday, because your designs of like your skater characters are just so cool. And I keep wanting to say so rad, by the way, and I can't do it, but know that every time.
I mean, we were trying to develop that show. I kind of want to do this like prequel Kipo comic about like a group of skaters that actually see the apocalypse happen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm focusing on trying to get done next.
Nice. That is just, I like that there's like this kind of YA space in animation now, and I'm like, yes, oh my god, finally.
I mean, it's tough because after Kipo, they were like, we're never doing anything like that.
Oh wait, I had to leave that one earlier, but I saw, oh my god, your chat with but you were talking about literally this exact same thing where he's like, oh, we really love the show you did. Could you do literally anything else? Like,
I think in reality, because we are in the kids space, there's not like YA executives, there's not YA marketing, there's not a whole YA, there's nobody doing that right now.
I feel like it's gonna be like one thing will like explode, and then everybody's gonna be like chasing that, like, oh god, we gotta do it. It's gonna be like one. It's gonna be like a Netflix or a Hulu or just one thing is gonna just put one out. It'll blow up, and then everybody's gonna be like, but could we just get something like this?
I almost think it's gonna have to be a more independent model. Like I think it's gonna have to be somebody who crowdfunds or figures out a way to do it outside of the system, and then maybe the system sees that happening and tries to copy it.
Yeah.
Because it's such an investment. Like I have these conversations a lot with people. When you look at within a system, like when you look at within a studio, sometimes it takes $5 million to get to a point that you or me could actually get to on our own outside of the system for like 20 grand.
Yep, that is very fair.
So for them, if they go, we don't know if we'll make money on this. We're scared that this might be a bad investment. And if we do it, we're putting like 50 million.
Yeah, it's like constant vetting. And I feel like that's the one thing, because like I'm not as far along as you, let me know, but like dipping my toes in that development space. And I feel like I didn't appreciate before the sheer amount of money that it takes to like make a show. And I mean, it's not that it like needs it, but like because of the studio systems, you're right in that like for them to make shows, it is insanely expensive, and that's why it's such a risk. Whereas like if a crowdfunded you or I just like cobble together a team of 10 plus animators and like manically make a short thing, it will exist faster and with less red tape than if it had to be through a studio system.
Yeah. But I could definitely see a future where those types of things start taking off. Because also the technology is starting to get so easy. And it's starting, you're starting to see where in 10 years when we got the augmented reality goggles instead of our iPhones, and we're just literally going to be moving puppets of characters, anyone's going to be able to make
We're just living inside of the Storyboard Pro Toon Boom VR, where we just move this.
It's only going to get to that point where it becomes so easy to make the content, and then it's just about who are the creators that mastered the skills, you know, the storytelling skills. And I feel like it'll be a lot of independent people doing cool stuff, which I'm excited for that future.
Yeah, no, I literally, like, I feel like every time I have conversations like this, I just leave with this, like, invigorated, like, oh, gotta make some cool shit now.
Yeah, it's like, it's so easy to do it in the comic world. It doesn't pay anything, but there's no barriers. Like, you could just do whatever you want. You can make a web comic. You could make, you could even get published, you know. It's just not profitable, but at least you could kind of get cool content exactly the way you see it out there.
Yeah, and there's something to that ownership because, and I mean, I love like the development process at studios. I think it's a little bit different than what people maybe expect, where it's like, and you know this, like it's not like they just buy your idea and they make your idea. It's more like they buy your potential, and then together with them, you figure out what to make maybe an idea. But
you know
I
always give advice to people when they do it. Like, if you ever sell a show, there might be a development exec that has 15 to 20 shows that they oversee. And they may actually kind of just forget about your show. Like, it's a pile, and, you know, that they're checking in on one, and then they're checking, and then they got really invested in this one, and this one, it seems like it's going, and the other 20 are sitting there. And I always tell people, pretend like you just are your own development exec. Like, pretend like you are, like, I say, draw something and send it to them every week. Write something and send it to them. Like, be the proactive one. Because a lot of times people sell something and then they're just sitting there waiting. When is this exec going to get back to me with notes?
It's like you have to continue to show them. Yeah, it's like you have to be like, I'm making it one way or the other. Just look at it go.
Yeah, and it gets them excited. It reminds them of your particular project, so your particular project doesn't just sort of disappear into the ether. I'll have sometimes 7 shows in development at once. And if there's one that even I forget about, nobody brings it up. It just disappears for like a year. And then you're like, email the person, what's going on with that? They're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Your voice just gets really high. You walk away a little bit. Yeah, I think that's the other thing I'm starting to realize, and is why, like I feel like I have like 5 to 10 ideas at varying stages of alive at any given point, where it's like there's the ones that are like doing stuff that I like need to, like there's money sort of involved, so now it's like a job. So, and then there's the ones that is like they're more incubation and I'm just, you know, writing stuff, and then there's the ones where I'm like just churning out art, and all of them are equally plausible because development is so uncertain, and like it's not kind of like your 8 Mile you got one shot moment. It's more like just keep throwing things in the air, see which one sticks.
A lot of people think, oh, I got this one idea and I'm going to work on this one idea, and it's like, you really should have 10. You should sell all of them. You should be developing all of them because you want a wide net, like do a live action idea, do a feature idea, do some TV ideas, because 1 out of 100 might actually get greenlit, you know?
Exactly. Actually, speaking of feature, so that is a space that I know literally nothing about. And you are one of the few people I've ever met who like you jumped the shark. Like you went from TV to feature. And I'm just so curious. Like, is it weird? How's it like over there? Like, it's just, because I almost only ever have worked with either, you know, TV people, or I've worked with like feature people who like came from boarding on a feature and then like jumped into TV for a little while, but like still kind of considered themselves like feature board artists who are just like visiting. But like you seem to be moving between the two, and I'm just so like, what is that like? Because their timelines alone.
Before Kipo, I had never worked in television.
So wait,
I'd only done feature. So my very first job for 10 weeks, I was a character designer on a TV show. And then I got a job as a board artist at DreamWorks Feature in like 2006, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
And I was just there until I sold Kipo. So I had only been working on features.
So TV was the weird one for you.
Yeah. So TV was like I'd be boarding the pilot, and then people would tell me, you can't do this shot. They can't animate that. Like, you can't do this. No. You can't do that. Like they were like, oh, you should have 600 shots in an episode, and I had 200. I just don't cut a lot. And then I just said, you know what? Let's just ship it and see what happens. And they totally did it. They were like, oh, yeah,
I mean, it clearly worked. It was fine. But that is so
but a lot of those shots, you'll notice they're very long shots, and they don't cut very much, and they're more. Sometimes they're moving through a 3D space, and I was just like, well, let me go Google how to After Effects this, and I'd like pull up the file, like, you could just slide this here, and then like, okay, I guess you could do that.
Yeah, I feel like, honestly, I'm really excited for the line blur because, and I see people talking about the pacing in Kipo, and like, same. Like, I feel like Kipo did have kind of that more I'm going to use the word everybody uses, cinematic pacing and shot choices, because it had like these long, luxurious shots. And sometimes in TV, it feels like they're afraid to stop the camera for too long. And so, like, I love that we're doing that.
They told us, like, they were like, well, if you do that, that means you can only do like 3 or 4 fixes if the animation comes back bad. So a lot of times I would pull up in Photoshop something and just refix it myself just in Photoshop, because we could only make 3 fixes, but there was one where like the eye was over here or something. Or whatever
like, okay, we gotta fix that one.
Yeah.
Her head flew away for a little while.
We'll pay for this, but this one I'll redraw this in Photoshop.
Oh my god, I love the negotiations. So I did retakes directing, or animation retakes on Final Space on season 2, and they do their animation, a lot of their animation retakes in house. So they have like a team of like 3 to 4, you know, Harmony animators, and like yeah. So it was like a negotiation where he's like, okay, they can do this, but then we'll do this. And then we'll like add these new things here. I don't know. I've never seen, because before that I'd only ever worked on like shows where there's only the animation studio, and then like you send retakes and you just do that for however long you can afford to. But it was really cool kind of collaborating that way. Like I think I'm friends with one of the like effects animators at Jamfield now, because we just had so much back and forth with them. And I'm like, wow, it's kind of like we get to like poke the animation a little. But yeah, it is also the money situation where it's like you just can't afford to do too many passes.
The biggest difference I noticed is you board way faster in feature. Like the speed, like on average, you're doing like 8 pages of script a week if you have scripts, right? You're cranking out a full screening sometimes in 6 weeks, and with a crew of 4 or 5 people. So your speed is like insane. So then when I went to TV and I was like, you're gonna spend 6 weeks on 8 pages? What are you doing for the other 5 weeks?
That
Can't you
is so
board
funny.
that the first week? But I didn't realize it's a completely different job. Like,
Yeah.
you have to be closer to on model. The stuff has to be ready to
The
ship.
level of
Like,
articulation on TV boards are
yeah,
bordering keyframe animation now. So
yeah.
like,
So then I
yeah,
was
it's
like, oh, actually, how do you finish that in 6 weeks? I can't even do that. Like, what on earth? Because
it's
the
cool
jobs are very
because
different.
feature boards almost look like a beat sheet where it's just like a lot of like the key poses, but there's not like really like you're not like full on explaining how a character does a
Yeah.
specific gesture. Whereas in TV, it's like,
It's
wow,
almost
this is
like what I would consider finished storyboards would probably be thumbnails for a TV show.
Yeah.
And that would be finished. Like, I'm done. I'm never going to touch those again.
That is so crazy. Yeah. But there's something really charming about like I think it was the art book of Zootopia. I was looking at something earlier and I was like, wow, these boards are just so like there's kind of air in them because they're so not just tight and finished that you get the tone and you get kind of the staging, but there's still a lot of play. And so I can see how like the animators still had like a lot that they could, add to that. Whereas I think in TV, it's just, you're so, the schedule is so tight and there's not a lot of wiggle room. So you're just like, oh no, just do this. Just do what's on here.
You also don't throw much out. Like on a TV show, like that's what you're going to ship and that's what you're going to watch.
Yeah.
And on a feature, you put up the whole movie, you throw the whole movie away, you try a different movie. Like there's no sense of this one I'm doing right now is the final one. Like, oh, what do you think of this? You put up a whole sequence that might be 500 drawings that you did that week, or 700 drawings, 1,000 drawings, and like you show it, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. But then it might get that whole scene might get thrown away, and it's nothing. It's more like clay. Like you're just kind of sculpting clay.
That's really cool.
You're not precious with anything.
Yeah, it's like everything's still kind of ideation for boards. Like you're not. Yeah, it feels like because there are definitely moments, especially like directing, where there'll be things where it's like, could probably do this a little bit differently, but like, is this the hill that I want to die on and ask for another day for edit to do?
Another big difference I noticed when you sit down in the edit room and you watch a screening of an animatic screening of a full movie, right about the 22-minute mark where your episode would have ended.
Yeah.
If your movie is not firing on every single cylinder, it is torture to watch the rest of that screening.
Oh no!
Like if all of your setup, your want, your need, your character personalities, what they're going, if everything isn't set up like perfectly, the rest of that movie is freaking hard to watch.
Oh no! It is a much longer screening.
You do so many iterations of it because like you watch it, you go, this is freaking painful to watch. I guess maybe what if we had a different want, which means we strip out this whole thing from the first act, which means we have to strip out all of the second act and pick a different, okay, let's try that. Yeah. That was a little better, but God, it's still hard to sit through 90 minutes of this.
It is.
With a
90 minutes.
22-minute mark, if there was something kind of not quite working, at least it ended and you went to the next episode.
Yeah, you're like, I have some questions, but it's over, so I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is
I
really
think that
cool.
might be part of it.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's really funny because like I think because Bruce does come from feature as well, he does have that, and I'm sure you had the same ideology in Kipa, where there is this kind of malleableness to storyboards that like is different to how I've worked before on kids content, at least. Like I've seen this in sitcom because it's like always punch up, but like in kids content, it was always a little more like, you get a script, you avoid the script, okay, we're done. But like in this, it's like, oh, that sort of plays, but what if? And like exactly what you described, it's like, the want feels a little, what if? And just like pulling that thread and letting it unravel so you can put something stronger in its place. And I'm like, wow, I am not used to working this way, but it's really cool. I hope production's doing all right.
Yeah, our first season, we would reboard whole episodes, you know, like,
yeah.
that doesn't work. Just let's throw that away and reboard
it. It was like, just try it again.
And as we went on, we started doing 3 episodes at once rather than 2. And then our deadline started shrinking. It suddenly got to a point where it's like, that's the way it came in. That's what it is. We can't change it.
I like how on the front end you were like, oh, this is very romantic. Like, oh, we can change it. And by the end, just go. Yeah, we have like, our line producer is really good at like keeping us in check. So hopefully we should be able to. But yeah, it's really I feel like making. I like TV because of the time constraint, but also it is a heinous time constraint where it's like you want to make this perfect version of a thing, and you only have like 5 to 6 weeks to do that.
Or like you run out of budget for backgrounds and character design, so you're making whole episodes where you just pull old backgrounds.
Yeah, you're like, how much can we get away with in silhouette? A lot of very clever shot choices suddenly where you're like, we have no money.
Yeah. Man.
Oh man, I mean your backgrounds. Where's Angela? I saw her here before, but no, like the backgrounds in Kipo are freaking artwork. Yeah. It's just so beautiful.
That having Angela sung that was a department that literally ran itself. I didn't have to do anything because I don't know how to paint. I could literally just show up and be like, "This looks great, Angela. Keep going." Like, man, that was the best having her.
That's so good.
That's the one thing I found. If I ever show Ran again, sometimes like you might bring on somebody where you're like, oh well, I'll do half of it. You know what I mean? Like maybe you bring on somebody that's like really good at one thing, and you yourself are really good at another thing, and you're like, oh, so we'll kind of be working together, you know?
Yeah.
And I think as time goes on, you actually just don't have time to do any of that. So like if you could set up every department where you're like, that person just does it perfectly. I don't ever have to get in and paint or get in and draw or get in and board. Like, I'm like, set every department up like that.
That's a beautiful, like, perfect advice, because I'm like as I watch The Proud Family, like Eastwood Long, who is our art director, and literally every time he shows like a background or a color script, I'm just like, oh, sorcery.
Yeah,
that's cool. Look at it; it's so beautiful.
It's almost bad. It's almost bad if you can do something, because like the fact that I can storyboard, I could hop in and reboard stuff, which I did.
I get that. I feel like it's like you can't help yourself, right? Like you're just like, you gotta get in there.
But the fact that I don't know how to paint, I just look at the painting, I'm like, that looks awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel it. I feel that at this virtual level, but it's really amusing too. Like, I think on Proud it is like, I know like Bruce has a lot of sway over like character designs, obviously, but like Eastwood is 1000% just the like all the color and the backgrounds and stuff. But I see those moments in the boards. It was like Bruce is like, I kind of, what if we just, and he'll like start drawing on the screen. I'm like, you couldn't help yourself. Like, gotta get in there.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it is. I feel like it's that excitement for just being like part of it. But then also the reality of like, since when you're a showrunner, you have like 5,000 other jobs at the same time, and you can't just be drawing.
No, it gets to the point where if you do that, you're actually messing things up for everybody, because now the production people have to keep a record of the fact that you drew something, and then they have to adjust the storyboard profile to match it. And it's like, and then, you added a background they didn't have. Oh, okay, guys, I have to go because my wife is taking a meeting. And I'm
oh no!
But
so Rad is reprimanded. Let's all just remember. Oh, this was super fun. I should probably go keep throwing stuff in edit because I have a meeting in like 2 hours. But
Dude, thanks for
yeah, this
chatting
was
with me.
super fun, man. Thanks for
All
having
right,
me and for dealing with the tech difficulties.
cool.
All right,
All right,
bye.
I'll see you. Bye.
See ya.